Hi guys, today it's time to wrap up my second half of June. So my second half was definitely way less successful than the first half, but that is fine. Overall, I still had an amazing reading month. I read Asking for It by Louise O'Neill. This is the second book by Louise O'Neill that I've read, and this is the second book that I could not give a rating. As Only Ever Yours, this is not an enjoyable read. I do think I like this a little bit more, simply because while Only Ever Yours had lots of really interesting thoughts and truths in it, and it was something that made me feel very uncomfortable, it was still dystopian. Whereas this book is realistic fiction. It deals with rape culture. The main character is actually someone who gets raped in the story, and while we don't experience the moment itself from her perspective, there's obviously a lot of triggers for sexual assault and rape. I would strongly advise against reading if you have experienced anything like that, because for me personally, even though I don't have any experience with that, thankfully, it was such a hard book to read. I think what I really liked about this was that the main character is a girl that really is someone where many people would say she was asking for it. We get a before and after. Before is really, this girl kind of how she behaves in school and how she behaves in parties, but also her thoughts. And, she's someone who just really enjoys sex. She really just enjoys being the center of attention. I think it's a really important perspective, and I think it's gonna be a really eye-opening read for a lot of people. I think what's also really interesting is the family dynamics in this one. It's a lot about how, kind of what happens to the family after this, because it is a rape that is very public. It's something that in this town that the girl lives in kind of, is a big thing pretty quickly. I think that personally was actually, for me, one of the toughest parts. Her brother, her mother, and her father, who all three have different opinions on it and have different ways to deal with it. And I think especially her father, I'm actually getting choked up because it was so hard to read how it changed how this father saw his daughter. You could tell that he thought it was her own fault as well. And it doesn't only deal with her and with her situation in school and her also, mentally, how she deals with it. She also goes to therapy, which I think is always really important to portray. It talks a little bit about the whole, case around it, the criminal case around it. So it's very, very intense, but if you think you can deal with it, then I would still highly recommend it. This is why I didn't really give it a rating, because it's not an enjoyable book. It's a good book. It's an important book. But it's tough. Ooh. Alright, let's get to something a little bit more cheerful. Next, I listened to the audiobook of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. I always thought that I really liked Goblet of Fire, and nothing about this really changed. I wouldn't say I like the movie more, but I do think that the movie for this book is really important. All of the amazing things that happen in the Triwizard Tournament, I do think that they are portrayed really well in the movie. It's another one that is a really well done adaptation, and I think for this one, an adaptation just works really well. And now, as far as my ranking goes, I do kind of, as I go through the series, kind of want to see how I would rank them with adding each book. I'm still having a little bit of an identity crisis because Prison of Azkaban, I think, is not my favorite anymore. So I'm ooh, I think at this moment I would probably put Goblet of Fire a little bit above the third book. So far my ranking is actually from least favorite to favorite is actually the first, the second, the third, the fourth. Which that's really interesting. For me so far, it's really just getting better with each book, I feel like. So I'm interested to see what I feel about Order of the Phoenix and how it's gonna rank. Then I listened to the audiobook of Buffering by Hannah Hart. This is her memoir, and I've been wanting to read this for such a long time because I really like Hannah Hart. because she's someone that I find really funny and I really enjoy her humor, but also she's someone who is very open about talking about her mental illness and who is someone who is a really, you know, big voice for the queer community on YouTube. And so yeah, I've been so excited to dive into it. Especially her family history is really, really intense, and I love how open and honest Hannah was in this. And I think that in her videos, while she is open about like general stuff like mental health and like sexuality, she's not someone who is very open about like her personal stuff. I was not expecting for her to open up as much as she did in this book. I also really, really liked her narration. I just really like listening to Hannah's voice. I think she has a really nice voice. Then there was the reading double Rita Sun by Maddie and B. This actually motivated me to read a little bit more, and I read Lumberjanes Volume 2 and 3, and this was a really interesting experience because what I didn't know is that Volume 3 had a different artist. And so I read Volume 2 and I loved it. I was like, oh my god, I'm so hooked on this now. I did enjoy the first volume, but I wasn't in love with it. And so in the second volume, I did fall in love with it. And I was like, oh my god, I'm so excited to continue this now. And then I went into the third volume and I was like, what is happening? I did get used to the art style at some point. The biggest part for me was actually that I felt like lots of the humor that I enjoyed so much about the second volume in particular was gone. So I'm excited to see where it's going. I was just... especially because going into the first volume, I expected a different art style. And now I felt like I got so used to this art style and I felt like it fit the story so perfectly because it was like a little bit messy and a little bit all over the place. And now it's just like very like... I think it would have been easier on me if I had known that the art style would change. Then I listened to the audiobook of Make Your Bed by William H. McGraven. I had a little bit of a crisis this month, just life slump as I like to call it. You know, when people are on booktube like, I'm so behind on booktube or I'm so behind on reading. I was behind on life in June, and so I wasn't really having the greatest month, and so I kind of looked on Overdrive for some like motivational non-fiction, and I stumbled upon Make Your Bed and I saw some really good Goodreads reviews, so you know, I thought why not get into it. I do think overall it's inspirational and motivating, but also it didn't really tell me anything new. What I did really like is that it was always a moral that was kind of combined with some of McGraven's story that he experienced as a veteran. And that was really interesting to me to kind of have these things combined. And I think that just really added to finding this book a little bit more engaging and not just like, here's your lessons, do this, do this, do this, and you'll be a happier person. But I think overall it didn't really tell me anything new, and it didn't really tell me how to do any of the things. I wanted more how to. And finally this month I read Every Heart a Doorway by Shauna McGuire. This is something that you have probably heard more than enough about. I wouldn't say I was disappointed, it wasn't really my thing, because people always say, so this is a book that's like a portal fantasy and it's like about all of these children that like, you know, get to like Narnia and all of these worlds. Obviously there's not actually like Narnia and stuff in it, but like there's these fantasy worlds and the kids kind of, you know, go through a wardrobe and they get into this world and they kind of get adjusted to this world and they realize, okay, this world is where I belong. And then when they come back for some stupid reason, they get to this boarding school and it's kind of, you know, how to deal with being back in this world. That's such a cool premise. I think we can all agree, especially as readers, that that's something that's really cool and that's a really cool concept. And I was really excited about it, especially because the representation in it also sounded really good. I just expected this book to be more about the different worlds that these characters went into. I mean, this is only a novella that has like 160 something pages. I mean, we get introduced to so many characters in the beginning. Like so many characters that even at the end of the book, I was still mixing up different characters and still got confused with all of the names. This is not so much about like the different worlds and the characters and where they came from. This is basically a murder mystery story. and I just didn't really want to read a murder mystery story. It's just not something that I really, you know, pick up. And so I was a little bit like, where's this going? I don't want to read this. And so, as I said, I'm not really disappointed. It just wasn't really something that I think I would have even picked up if I knew this was the direction this would go into. Now, I do feel like in the end, it kind of all came together very, very well. Like, I still really love the concept and I'm still looking forward to, you know, reading more about it. I feel like it kind of tries to catch people a little bit with saying this is like a story about a boarding school for people who fell into portals, when it's actually a murder mystery. So, yeah. And that's everything that I read in June. I am exhausted. Like, I just want my fucking summer holiday to start. At this point, I just can't. I'm done. Probably not gonna get a lot of reading done in the first half of July either. So probably not gonna do a part 1, part 2 wrap up for July. Also don't know how many videos I'm gonna upload in July. It's just gonna be a really kind of stressful month for me, both like mentally and physically. Then once that's over, I have my summer holiday and I will be daily vlogging the booktubeathon, and I will be uploading definitely a booktubeathon TBR. If you don't see me too much on here, it's because it's a little bit stressful for me before the summer holidays, but then you will see more than enough of me during the booktubeathon. So I think you're gonna be fine. And also I'm always spamming Twitter. So if you miss me, at Drums of Autumn. So anyway, let me know how your June went as a reading month, as a life month, and what your favorite book of June was. I think mine probably would have had to be Ramona Blue, very closely followed by Warcross. I mean, honestly, if this had been a whole wrap-up, I would be really happy right now because I read so many cool things in the first half, but the second half, life and reading-wise, was just a little bit sad. Anyway, I'm gonna go. Thank you so much for watching, and I guess I'll see you soon. Bye!